Emily Carter learned about the betrayal on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window as she rinsed dishes, her sleeves rolled up, her mind half on dinner, half on her daughter's homework. Mark's phone buzzed. On the counter, he was upstairs showering. Emily did not mean to look. She only wanted to silence the sound. The screen lit up with a message preview. "I missed last night. When can I see you again?" The world did not stop. The rain kept falling. The water kept running. But something inside Emily went quiet, like a door closing forever. She stood there longer than she realized, staring at the words. Her hands trembled, but her face stayed calm. She scrolled once. Then again there were weeks of messages. Short ones, long ones, sweet ones. Words Mark had not used with her in years. Emily put the phone back exactly where it had been. She finished the dishes. She dried her hands. She called her daughter to brush her teeth. She moved through the house like a guest who did not belong there anymore. That night, she did not sleep. By morning, she had already decided something without saying it out loud. She would not break down. She would not make a scene. She would survive. When Mark confessed, his voice shook. He said it was a mistake. He said it meant nothing. He said it was over. Emily listened without interrupting. She nodded at the right moments. She asked practical questions. Inside, her heart felt like glass under pressure. People later said she was strong. They said they admired how she handled it. They said forgiveness was brave. Emily never corrected them. It was easier to let them believe that than explain how. Numb strength really feels. Life moved forward because it had to. School mornings, packed lunches, work emails, birthday parties. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, everything had. Emily learned quickly that pain does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits. She stopped talking about her feelings because words felt useless. Every time she tried to explain the hurt, it came out too small, too neat. Like she was lying, even when she wasn't. So she stopped trying at night. After Mark fell asleep, Emily stayed awake. She stared at the ceiling. She replayed moments from the past, looking for signs she had missed. Late work nights, changed passwords, new habits. The answers were always there, mocking her. She blamed herself. Then she blamed him. Then she blamed the world. The anger came in waves, sharp and sudden. The sadness came later, heavy and slow. Months passed. Emily discovered that survival creates habits. She learned how to smile on command. She learned how to listen without feeling. She learned how to be pleasant even when her chest ached. She also learned how lonely forgiveness could be. One evening, unable to breathe inside her own thoughts, Emily took a notebook from a drawer and began to write. She did not plan it. Words poured out fast, messy, real. She wrote about betrayal, about the moment her life split in two, about the woman she was before and the woman she no longer recognized. Writing became her secret. The notebook stayed hidden beneath old sweaters. It held her anger, her questions, her quiet wishes. It held the version of Emily no one else saw. Mark tried. In his own way, he tried. He asked how she felt. He offered space, offered time, but every question felt late. Every apology felt like a reminder. Emily did not know how to tell him that love does not always survive honesty. Their home filled with silence, not angry silence, polite silence. The kind that pretends nothing is wrong. Emily felt herself shrinking, not physically, but emotionally. She became careful with her words, careful with her reactions, careful not to want too much. That scared her more than the betrayal. One afternoon, she walked into a small bookstore cafe to escape the noise of her thoughts. The place smelled like coffee and paper. Soft music played. It felt safe. She ordered tea and found a seat near the window. That was when she noticed Daniel. He sat alone reading, unaware of her. There was nothing dramatic about him. He looked ordinary. comfortable, calm, but when he looked up, their eyes met for a brief second, and Emily felt something unexpected. Recognition, not attraction, not desire. Just a quiet understanding she could not explain. They did not speak that day, but when Emily returned the following week, he was there again. This time, he smiled politely. She nodded. Nothing more. The third time, they exchanged a few words about a book recommendation. The conversation was short, easy. When it ended, Emily realized her hands were shaking. She did not understand why. Daniel never asked personal questions. He never pushed. That made her feel safe. They talked about small things, weather, stories, places they loved. With him, Emily did not feel like a broken wife. She felt like a person again. She told herself it meant nothing, but the notebook began to fill faster. Emily wrote about longing, not for another man, but for herself. For the woman she used to be before love became something she had to manage. Instead of feel, guilt followed her everywhere. Guilt for staying, guilt for hurting, guilt for feeling anything at all. Some nights, she watched Mark sleep and wondered how two people could share a bed but live in different worlds. She wondered if survival was supposed to feel this empty. She never crossed a line. She never intended to. But the emotional distance inside her kept growing. And distance has its own power. One evening, as she walked home from the cafe, Emily realized a truth she had been avoiding. Infidelity did not end when the affair ended. It lived on in silence, in restraint. In the parts of her she had locked away. She was surviving, yes, but she was also disappearing. The secret life she lived was not about another relationship. It was about identity. About the quiet rebuilding of a heart that no longer trusted easily. Emily did not know where this path would lead. That the woman smiling at neighbors was not the whole story. And somewhere between forgiveness and longing, between loyalty and truth, Emily Carter stood at the edge of a life no one else could, carrying a secret that was slowly changing. Everything. Emily had thought she could contain her secret life, but Daniel was changing that. Their encounters at the cafe became more frequent, more natural. He never pried, never commented on her personal life, yet she felt an invisible thread connecting them. Each conversation, though casual, left her mind buzzing long after she returned home. She began noticing the way her chest would lift when she saw him. How her laughter came easier in his presence, how the edges of her old pain softened just slightly. It was confusing. She loved Mark, or at least the idea of the family they had built. She wanted stability, the comfort of familiar routines. Yet Daniel made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt since before the betrayal. She began questioning what survival truly meant. Was surviving just about enduring, or was it about reclaiming yourself? One Saturday morning, she found herself walking through a quiet park, thinking about Daniel and the way his calm presence unsettled her heart. A group of children played nearby, their laughter piercing and joyful. She remembered the afternoons when she had taken her daughter here, imagining a life that was whole and unbroken. Now the thought of happiness seemed fragile, like a glass sculpture teetering on the edge of a table. Then she saw him. Daniel sitting on a bench under the old oak tree, reading again. He looked up, their eyes met, and he waved. Just a small, casual wave. Her steps slowed, and she realized she had been walking toward him without thinking. For a moment, the world narrowed to that bench, that smile, that quiet presence. He said, his voice soft, easy. Hi, she replied, a little breathless. They talked about books at first, then the city, then the park itself. No one else existed around them. The connection wasn't dramatic, wasn't urgent, was calm, steady, like the first slow burn of a fire. Emily felt her heart expand in ways it had been forced to forget. Later, when she returned home, she found Mark waiting with his usual smile. He asked about her day, but Emily's mind was still with Daniel. She forced herself to answer simple words, nothing revealing. She noticed Mark's eyes searching hers for reassurance, for the warmth they once shared. She wanted to give it to him, but her heart no longer responded the same way. She had changed. She had grown in places he couldn't reach anymore. Notebook became her outlet again, but this time it was different. She wrote about longing, about connection, about feelings she hadn't allowed herself to name. Writing became a kind of therapy, a way to navigate the tension between loyalty and awakening. Emily understood that her heart was capable of more. Then Pennette was capable of desire, of hope, of new beginnings. One evening, Daniel found one of her stories. She had posted it anonymously on a forum for people who had experienced betrayal, people who needed to feel understood. The words were raw and honest. Thousands had read them, but when Daniel recognized her voice, he was stunned. He reached out gently, with a message that didn't demand explanation but acknowledged her pain. Emily read his words and felt something she hadn't in years: permission. Permission to be honest with herself. Permission to feel fully, even if it hurt others. She knew she couldn't undo the past, couldn't erase the betrayal, couldn't change the choices she had made to survive. But she could reclaim her future, one careful step at a time. As weeks passed, Emily and Daniel's interactions grew more meaningful. She still returned home to Mark, still maintained the life she had built, but inside she felt a quiet revolution. The woman who had endured silently was now alive in small, deliberate ways. She smiled more freely. She laughed without restraint. She allowed herself to feel without guilt. Mark noticed subtle changes. He tried to connect, but Emily realized she no longer sought him for emotional fulfillment. She sought him for peace, for companionship, for stability. The love that had bound them had shifted. She no longer felt betrayed in the same way she felt independent. She felt strong. Then one night she sat down with her notebook and wrote the story of everything. Not for Mark, not for Daniel, but for herself. She typed carefully, revisiting every memory, every heartbreak, every lesson learned. She posted it online anonymously. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from women and men across the country, each sharing their own stories of infidelity, survival, and quiet strength. Emily felt seen in a way she hadn't for years. Daniel reached out again, this time not just with words, but with presence. He didn't make promises. He didn't ask for her heart. He simply acknowledged the courage it took to tell the truth. "You deserve honesty from others and from yourself," he said. Those words lingered. Emily understood that surviving infidelity wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about replacing one heart with another. It was about reclaiming one's identity, one's dignity, one's power to choose. She realized she could love Mark for what he had been and still love herself for what she had become. The days grew brighter, and Emily noticed herself breathing easier. She walked with her head held higher, spoke with more clarity, and looked at her reflection with acceptance rather than shame. Her secret life had become a life revealed, and the exposure felt liberating. Emily didn't yet know what the future held. She didn't know if she would rebuild her marriage fully, leave, or embark on a completely new path. But she understood that the power to choose lay entirely with her. The secret life she had guarded, the life of pain and quiet resilience, had finally been exposed, and in that exposure lay freedom. Every step she took was deliberate. Every choice she made was informed. She no longer existed in the shadow of betrayal. She existed in the light of her own awakening. The world outside continued, indifferent as ever, but Emily no longer needed. It, too, defined her. She had reclaimed herself. And as she walked through the city streets one evening, past cafes and bookstores, past familiar parks and quiet corners, she realized she was no longer just surviving. She was alive, fully. For the first time in years, she smiled at the possibility of love. Not dependent, not desperate, but chosen. And she understood, with quiet certainty, that the future could be hers, whatever it might bring. Her heart, once fragile and broken, had been rebuilt. Not by forgiving others, not by hiding, not by surviving alone, but by exposing the truth of who she was and embracing it completely. Emily Carter, the woman who had endured betrayal, now stood on the edge of life she had chosen for herself, fearless, open, and alive in a way she had never been before.